This episode of Run It Back Philly is brought to you by Factor Meals. Fresh cooked meals at your doorstep for as little as $11 a meal. That's cheaper than pulling up to the McDonald's drive-thru, baby. Go to factormeals.com/runitback50. Use the promo code runitback50 for 50% off your first box.
Run It Back Philly. No frauds, no fanboys, no intros.
I think Nick Nurse and Daryl Morey will work better than Doc Rivers and Daryl Morey did, too. I think Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers first of all, they weren't hired together. It's not like they joined forces and said, like, hey, let's go get hired together. They were hired completely separately.
Right.
And I just think it was two big egos that were, you know, moving immovable object meets static force or whatever.
I never could remember this phrase, and I
like,
do it on my podcast.
Neither of them were budging. Doc was like, I'm not playing anybody under the age of 90. Daryl's like, dude, I have these players that I drafted that I think can work. And Doc, you know, and I think if we could get somehow leak footage of like the conference room, there was probably some pretty damn good arguments in those rooms. But, yeah, I think Nick Nurse and Daryl Morey will work better together. Nick Nurse, throughout his career, has implemented analytics into teams. Daryl Morey's known as...
His teams shoot more threes than Doc Rivers' teams when they have the talent.
Yeah, Daryl Morey's known as, you know, maybe the analytics guy in Houston and the years with D'Antoni and stuff like that. Doc Rivers has refused to even, like, say the word analytics out loud. There's rumors that the reason he was traded from Boston is because Danny Ainge wanted to go more analytical, and Doc was like, no, we're not doing that. So, you know, I think you have two guys that are at least a little more creative, open-minded, forward-thinking than Doc Rivers was. So I think Nick Nurse and Daryl Morey hopefully will work better together than I think Doc Rivers and Daryl Morey did. Before we get up out of here, let's do who's one player on the Sixers roster that you think will perform a lot better in this new Nick Nurse era than he did under Doc Rivers. My player first is Jalen McDaniels. I think you see a lot more out of Jalen McDaniels under Nick Nurse. This might be pretty obvious to say than you did under Doc Rivers. I think he has a lot of tools and a lot of tangibles. There's a lot of reasons Daryl Morey, I think, traded Matisse Thybulle for him, and he just didn't really. He had a little bit of run when he first got here, and he showed flashes running like end to end and like Euro step finish, and we were like, wow, Matisse would never be able to do that. And we were comparing everything he did to Matisse Thybulle, and then he just kind of fell out of the rotation. He had some bad games, and you know the narrative on Rivers is that, you know, you make one mistake and you're benched forever. So, sure. And then he wasn't even playing in the playoffs. I'm pretty excited to see what Jalen McDaniels, you know, looks like under Nick Nurse and some other players. What's yours?
Yeah, I mean, Maxi's too easy of an answer. I think that Maxi has to be, like, that's the reason I think they hired Nurse, to get the most out of Maxi.
Yeah, you think Nurse is going to get a lot more out of Maxi than Rivers?
I think so. I mean, I think that Maxi will. I also think the Sam Cassell thing was just.
Well, then he's an all-star. Then Maxi's an all-star next season too.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying I think he's very clearly going to be an all-star. I don't know if it's probably next season or the season after that for sure. But Sam Cassell, that whole thing I thought was like totally overblown, because like coaches always hire their own new staffs, and like. Yeah. I feel like Maxi developed himself. I don't really feel like sure, it was nice to have the coaching staff around and like a former veteran point guard to like lead Maxi and like show him that and whatever. But like, I kind of think that Maxi himself will, like, he works out really hard in the off seasons. He's always working on his game. I'm going to go with Melton if he's still on the team next year.
Nice.
The reason I say this is because now offensively, I think Melton kind of is who he is. I do think that there might be a little bit more room for him to be like maybe setting more pin downs for him to like come off screens, shoot threes, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I think that he kind of is who he is on offense, but defensively, the thing that Nurse always kind of preached in Toronto was putting pressure on the ball and generating turnovers for runouts. Now, part of that was because Toronto had to do that because their half-court offense was terrible. So they had to win on the boards. They had to turn the ball over. They had to do those things that just to generate enough points. But Melton is a guy very similar to McDaniels, where like I think if he gets enough run, if they run more zone, which Nurses has shown that he can do, having McDaniels and Melton at the top of that zone would be fantastic. I don't know how you really get through that level of length and athleticism, but if Melton still is on the team after I just tried to trade him, even though I don't want to, I think that he'll be able to, generate those turnovers. He's always going to lead the league in like steals per minute or whatever. He could see a minutes bump if Harden's gone next year. And I think it's just going to generate a ton of open court opportunities. And one of the reasons why analytics really likes Melton and probably likes the future of McDaniels is because those guys are really big steals and blocks guys. Yeah. And those are really high value plays because they can create open court opportunities, which if the Sixers have a team of guys that can actually hit their layups, D'Anthony, I hope you're working on that this summer.
He got towards the end of the season or in the playoffs, whatever it was, man. It was just like, what is happening?
I was like,
couldn't make a layup.
During streams, they would just be like, I would just sit. They said at one point I just started sitting there in silence whenever he was on the fast break, because I would just be like, I know what's coming. Like if it was him or Tobias in the fast break, I knew it was getting swatted at the rim or he was just going to smoke the layup.
Oh, Tobias. But, oh, my God.
Yeah, that's the one thing about Tobias I will definitely not miss.
Oh.
He's 6'8", and he plays like he's 6'1".
Oh, my God, man.
But yeah, so I'm hoping for a big year if Melton is still around. I would like to extend him if possible. Unless he is included in a trade that improves the roster for the long term.
It was a nice breath of fresh air with some of those Doc Rivers lineups, like Paul Reed, Jalen McDaniels, and D'Anthony Melton on the floor at the same time, just causing absolute havoc for the other team. And it was like, finally, we see like long athletes who are just getting their hands in passing lanes and creating.
The playoffs, and it was like, nope.
No, done. No more of that.
No, sir.
No more of that. Nope. Back to Harden and Embiid two-man game. We're going to run it into the ground. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to keep doing it until I get fired. And he did that.
Let's go.
I think honorable mention Jaden Springer. I'm excited to see maybe Jaden Springer actually gets an opportunity in the NBA.
I hope the jumper looks good next year, because if the jumper looks good, he's very obviously an NBA player.
Yeah, I mean, I don't take the G League, as too much of an assessment, but what he looked like in that game that got them into the championship with like a 41-point game, and like he was shooting threes, man, and it's an NBA three. Yeah, the defensive competition is not the same as the NBA, the closeouts and things like that, length on the defense in the G League, but the shot looked good to me from what I saw, so I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see if Jaden Springer gets some opportunity. Let's get through some of these here, and then we'll get up out of here. Thank you to everyone that supports the channel via Super Chat. Would you consider trading Maxi, Harris, plus picks for Cat to make a dominant 4-5 big man duo? Oh, no, sorry for laughing, man.
No way.
Fuck no. I can't do. No. Do I want to stuff Karl Anthony Towns next to Embiid? No, we did that with the Al Horford thing a couple years ago. I'm not interested in that at all. With CP3 as point guard, so Chris Paul, Karl Anthony Towns, and Joel Embiid, and we lose the future of Tyrese Maxey. Yikes! That's a quick.
Yeah, I mean, current contracts and projection going forward, I would just rather straight up have Tyrese Maxey than Karl Anthony Towns. Like, I know that Karl Anthony Towns is like more talented, or I would just rather have Maxey.
John Gotti, according to the new CBA, teams looking to get a lot of cap space next year can with a contract like Harris's. That contract is valuable. Now, yeah, thank you, John, for supporting the channel. Yeah, that's what we were saying. That we can finally feel like we can get off the Tobias contract because teams will be actually seeking out a big expiring
we're putting it in the universe.
Yes, and we're gonna end up with Tyrese Maxey at starting point guard, Zach LaVine in there somewhere, and Joel Embiid. This is when James Harden inevitably goes to Phoenix. I don't know. I'm just saying random things, but yeah.
If I had to make a guess, I've been on Harden's going back to Houston for 6 months because someone told me this months ago. But that same person is like, I don't know if it's gonna happen anymore.
Damn.
I think he's gonna be back.
You think he's going to be back in Philly if you had to make a
I think
prediction?
if I had to make a guess, I would say he's back on the Sixers next year.
All right, and if James Harden,
deal.
yeah, if James Harden's back on a smaller deal, and I think the key to this is not relying on 34-year-old James Harden in Game 6 or Game 7 in the playoffs. Like, I was watching just some of those plays because I was comparing it to what I think Nick Nurse's creativity is going to look like, and it was just there was no motion at all. It was just, why are we isoing James Harden when he looks like he's running in quicksand and can't finish at the rim anymore? I hated every second of it. So I think the key would be to a smaller deal, and you would just need Tyrese Maxey to be a much bigger part of the offense. And if you trade Tobias for somebody else that can score, then yeah, you don't end up in a Game 7 where you're hoping James Harden will randomly drop 45. You'd be much better off. That's where I'm at with it.
The last 2 years in Houston and the first year in Brooklyn, they were doing that more, and then it just kind of stopped.
Yeah, that's good to think about.